Let's start our first news with a major update surrounding Ilia and a potential rematch with Justin Gaethje. Ilia's team appears to be very interested in running things back with Gaethje. Ilia's manager, Malakawa, recently shared a picture on his social media story that many fans believe was a hint toward a possible rematch. The message behind the post was simple, but it certainly caught people's attention. It suggested that Ilia and his team may currently be focused on one particular opponent, and that opponent is Justin Gaethje. Of course, there is one major problem. Gaethje has already shut down the idea of this fight multiple times. He has made it clear that he isn't necessarily looking to jump straight into a rematch, especially if there are other opportunities available. However, that doesn't mean the fight is completely off the table. In the world of the UFC, things can change very quickly. Money, timing, rankings, and the UFC's plans can all play a major role in determining what happens next. Gaethje has always been interested in the biggest and most meaningful fights, and if the UFC believes a rematch with Ilia can become a massive event, they have the power to make the matchup extremely difficult to ignore. For Ilia, a rematch would also make plenty of sense. A second fight would give him the opportunity to settle unfinished business and potentially change the outcome from their previous encounter. So, while nothing has been officially confirmed at this point, the interest coming from Ilia's side is certainly something worth watching. And there's another major storyline developing in the lightweight division. Daniel Cormier has now shared his thoughts on what could be next for Ilia and Gaethje following their huge performances. The division is filled with elite contenders, and figuring out the next move is becoming increasingly complicated. With multiple fighters waiting for their opportunity, the UFC has several options on the table. But if Ilia's team really wants the Gaethje rematch, and the UFC sees enough value in making it happen, this story could develop very quickly. For now, the biggest takeaway is clear. Ilia's side appears interested in the rematch, while Gaethje has previously pushed back against the idea. That leaves the door open for a potentially massive showdown if all sides eventually agree. Move on to another news, and this time, Dustin Poirier has made his prediction for the highly anticipated matchup between Islam Makhachev and Ian Garry. Poirier, along with Jorge Masvidal, Dean Thomas, and Chris Weidman, is picking Islam to come out on top. In fact, all four analysts agreed that Makhachev has what it takes to beat Garry, making the prediction even more interesting. The discussion then turned to how Islam could get the victory. Would it go all the way to the judges, or could Makhachev find a way to finish the fight? Poirier admitted that when everyone on the panel picks the same fighter, he sometimes feels like choosing the opposite side just to cover the group. But in this case, he still backed Makhachev. The reasoning was simple. He believes the fight could be competitive in the early stages, but as the minutes pass, Makhachev's wrestling and pressure could begin to take over. One prediction went even further, suggesting that Islam could eventually break Garry down and find a submission. That sparked some surprise among the others, especially when the possibility of a choke finish was mentioned. The prediction wasn't necessarily that Makhachev would dominate from the opening seconds. Instead, the idea was that Islam could gradually slow Garry down with constant wrestling, forcing him to work defensively and making him more vulnerable as the fight progresses. And once Garry begins to tire, Makhachev could potentially capitalize on an opening and lock in a submission. Another possibility mentioned was ground and pound. Islam could use his wrestling to control the fight, wear Garry down, and then create an opportunity for a finish. That makes the matchup particularly intriguing. Garry is known for his striking, movement, and ability to maintain distance, while Makhachev's biggest advantages could come from his grappling, pressure, and ability to dictate where the fight takes place. For now, the panel is clearly leaning toward Islam, with some believing he could even get the finish. Move on to another news, because Arman is officially booked for a grappling matchup against Dillon Danis at RAF 14. The announcement confirms that Arman will take on Danis on October 3rd in Las Vegas, adding another major appearance to his already busy schedule. This will be a particularly interesting matchup because it marks Arman's first grappling contest since his upcoming fight against Mauricio Rufy. Arman is currently scheduled to face Ruffy on September 19th. meaning the fight with Danis has been booked before his matchup with Ruffy has even taken place. And honestly, that is a pretty bold move. There is still a major fight sitting in front of Arman, and the outcome of that contest could have a huge impact on what happens next in his career. But despite that, his team has already committed to another competition just weeks later. The timing makes this even more intriguing. Arman will first have to focus completely on Ruffy, who presents a serious challenge and could potentially derail those plans if he manages to pull off the upset. Until that fight is over, there is no guarantee that Arman will come out without injuries or other complications that could affect his ability to compete in October. But assuming everything goes according to plan, Arman will then turn his attention toward Danis. Danis is well known for his grappling background and his experience in submission-based competition, so this matchup gives Arman an opportunity to test himself in a different environment. Unlike a standard MMA fight, a grappling match removes the striking element and puts the focus directly on takedowns, positional control, transitions, and submissions. That could make the matchup especially interesting for Arman, who already has a strong wrestling and grappling foundation. However, the biggest storyline right now remains the timing. Arman is taking on Ruffy on September 19th, and just 2 weeks later, he is scheduled to compete against Danis at RAF 14 in Las Vegas. That is an extremely fast turnaround, especially for a fighter competing at the highest level. For now, the booking is official, and fans now have another Arman matchup to look forward to. First comes Ruffy on September 19th, and then, assuming everything goes according to plan, Arman will step back onto the mat against Dillon Danis on October 3rd at RAF 14. Move on to another news, because Carlos Prates has made a very interesting prediction for the upcoming showdown between Islam Makhachev and Ian Gary at UFC 330. According to Prates, Ian Gary is going to pull off what many people would consider a major upset and defeat Makhachev. Prates believes Gary will win the fight by decision. He didn't specify whether it would be a unanimous decision, but his prediction is clear. He expects Gary to survive the full fight and get his hand raised after the final bell. That is certainly a bold prediction, considering the level of opponent standing across from Gary. Makhachev has established himself as one of the most dangerous fighters in the UFC, particularly when it comes to controlling opponents with his wrestling, grappling, and relentless pressure. But Prates clearly believes Gary has the tools to deal with those strengths. The prediction immediately raises some eyebrows, because if Gary actually manages to defeat Makhachev at UFC 330, it would be a huge moment for his career. Gary has continued to develop as a fighter, and a victory over Makhachev would instantly put him among the biggest names in the division. The interesting part is that Prates sounds confident that Gary can avoid being finished and instead make it through all 5 rounds. That means his prediction appears to be based on Gary's ability to stay composed, defend the grappling exchanges, and use his striking over the course of the fight. Of course, predictions are one thing, but the reality inside the octagon can be completely different. With UFC 330 Fight Week finally here, all the attention is now shifting toward Makhachev versus Gary. This is a matchup that brings together 2 very different skill sets. Makhachev will look to use his elite grappling and pressure, while Gary will have the opportunity to showcase his range, movement, and striking. If Gary can keep the fight standing and maintain his distance, he could make things extremely difficult for Makhachev. But if Islam gets his preferred positions and begins controlling the fight on the ground, the entire dynamic could change. That is what makes this matchup so fascinating. Prates is betting on the underdog to go the distance and win by decision. Now, with Fight Week officially underway, we are getting closer to finding out whether this prediction becomes reality, or whether Makhachev once again proves why he is considered one of the most dangerous fighters in the UFC. Move on to another news, because Islam Makhachev has the MMA community talking after showing off an insane physical transformation ahead of UFC 330. We are now only days away from the event, and the latest episode of Embedded gave fans a close look at Islam during his current training camp. And one thing immediately stood out. Islam looks jacked at welterweight. His physique has noticeably changed, and fans across social media were quick to react. Many praised his conditioning, saying he looks significantly bigger and more muscular compared to his lightweight days. Some fans even pointed out that the move to welterweight appears to be benefiting his striking as well. With the additional size, his arms look more relaxed when he throws punches, while he still maintains the speed and movement that made him so difficult to deal with at lightweight. Of course, the biggest challenge will be Ian Garry. Taking Garry down and controlling him is going to be a serious test, especially at welterweight. But Islam's supporters remain confident in his ability to maintain his pace and pressure deep into the fight. The physical transformation also lines up with recent comments from Islam's coach, Javier Mendez. In a recent interview, Mendez revealed that Islam has added around 5 kilos of muscle to his frame since moving up to welterweight. That's more than 11 pounds of additional muscle, which is a significant change for any fighter. According to Mendez, Islam feels better carrying the extra weight and actually prefers competing at welterweight. That could be a major development for his career. Mendez even suggested that he doesn't expect Islam to return to lightweight again. If that's accurate, then UFC 330 could mark the beginning of a completely new chapter for Islam. He is bigger, stronger, and apparently more comfortable at this weight class, while still possessing the elite wrestling and grappling that made him one of the UFC's most dominant fighters. Now, all of that physical preparation will finally be tested inside the octagon. Move on to another news, and unfortunately, this one brings some very sad news surrounding Shavkat Rakhmonov. Multiple Kazakh media outlets are reporting that Shavkat's father has recently passed away. The news comes at an especially difficult time for the fighter, who had only just resumed training as he worked toward his long-awaited return to the UFC. According to the reports, a memorial for his father is expected to take place on August 13th. This is an incredibly difficult situation, and you have to feel for Shavkat and his entire family during what is clearly a heartbreaking period. The last couple of years have already been extremely challenging for him. Since 2024, Shavkat has undergone 2 knee surgeries, which have kept him away from competition and delayed his return to the octagon. There were also reports in 2025 involving Shavkat and his wife potentially going through a divorce. However, that situation remained unclear, with later updates suggesting that the divorce papers had reportedly been withdrawn. Another frightening situation involved an accident that reportedly affected his wife and child, adding even more stress to an already difficult period. So, when you look at everything Shavkat has dealt with over the past few years, this latest loss is especially heartbreaking. He had finally started training again and was working toward getting back inside the octagon. But now he is facing something far more important than fighting. There is no telling what he and his family are going through behind the scenes, but this is undoubtedly an extremely painful moment for everyone close to him. Our condolences go out to Shavkat Rakhmonov and his family during this difficult time. And with that, let's move on to another UFC story, as Valter Walker has now responded to and shut down a recent UFC rumor. Move on to another news, because we have some huge UFC 333 fight updates that could make this card absolutely stacked. Over the weekend, the UFC revealed the location and date for UFC 332, and we already reported on the first fight expected for that event. But now, attention has shifted toward UFC 333, with several major matchups reportedly being targeted. According to Vesnik MMA, a source that has previously broken multiple UFC fights, the rematch between Merab and Petr Yan is reportedly being lined up for the Abu Dhabi card. If this report turns out to be accurate, that would be a massive addition to the event. The two fighters have not competed against each other since their previous matchup, and another meeting would immediately give the card a major attraction. However, as always with these early reports, fans should take them with a grain of salt until the UFC officially announces the fights. And that wasn't the only big report. Red Fury MMA is also claiming that the expected main event for UFC 333 could be Alexander Volkanovski versus Movsar Evloev. If that happens, we're potentially looking at a very interesting main event, with Merab versus Petr Yan reportedly serving as the co-main event. That would give UFC 333 two major fights at the top of the card, assuming both reports eventually become official. It's important to remember that nothing is completely confirmed yet. These reports are coming from outlets that have successfully revealed UFC matchups in the past, which is why they're getting attention, but the UFC still has the final word. And this also creates an interesting situation for UFC 332. If Volkanovski versus Evloev and Merab versus Yan are both being targeted for UFC 333, the UFC will still need a major fight to headline UFC 332. One possibility that immediately stands out is Tom Aspinall. Could the heavyweight champion potentially make his return in early October and take the top spot on that card? For now, that's still unclear. But with several events taking shape, the next few weeks could bring some very significant announcements from the UFC.